1, 2, 3, 4.
One, two, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. You're listening to the Online Time Fame Podcast. I'm your host, JD. Long Range Comedy. This is the Long Range Comedy game. What it says is Long Range Comedy says something to you. We say Charleston White because he was the one who opened the door the most, more than had been done at any other time, as far as explaining how society operated and how one was supposed to look at the different layers, the different levels of social interaction. Now, digital media taught him a serious lesson, because through digital media and platforms, because he was in character, he said he learned his character from the Dolomite character from Rudy Ray Moore. Rudy Ray Moore had done comedy before, but once he got the character of Dolomite and spoke in rhyme, and as anyone who saw the Netflix film from 2019, the film was in theaters as well, and then it made its way to Netflix. When people saw that, and he said he saw the characterization of it, of Dolomite being brash, that's what people like. Inner city people like the brash speaking of almost like a hip hop persona, and that's where it came from. He, among others, were rhyming in that type of way. It was called toasting, and he did give credit. This is very important, something about Rudy Ray Moore. He did give credit, saying there was just someone who used to come around the record store where Rudy Ray Moore worked, asking for change, and he had the poetry, because it was like street grassroots. It was like folklore and tales that people knew, folk tales, and he went and got a group of people to also help and tell those stories, and that's kind of the backdrop of this episode of this show today, because a lot of what you see came from somewhere else. Like the public figures you see, they got their information from somebody else. It doesn't originate from them. Usually they saw someone else, and that's why it's a character, because they characterized what they saw, they commercialized it, they marketed it, and they profit from it, which is fine. But with Charleston White, by him starting at the grassroots level, at the community activist level, participating in legislation and teaching, educating people how to interact with children and from inner city homes, and like explaining their behavior. Once he did that, everything changed, because he didn't make the funding from doing that. He brought it to the digital realm. He brought his energy and his insight and knowledge to the digital realm, and he was multidimensional. And he explains it. People ain't multidimensional. It's people who got online. They talk, they get a lot of people, they're fortunate from there, and then they don't have a new direction to go to. When we say Charleston White, what he did was, even under pressure, he told the USA, America, I'm not your problem. Chinese people are a threat to you. The Chinese, the threat to you is Russia. That's when he said that took him to an international level, because most people, they talk domestically. Most of the people we see in the USA, they're talking domestically. They're talking to a domestic audience, because they wouldn't have a conversation if it was needed to save their lives for an international audience. Everybody read the same books. People went to college, went to incarceration, prison, jail, read some conscious books, and came back, and they knew more than they knew before. So those who read these books were written from the 50s through the 60s, 70s, or whenever from the past. They're talking past philosophies and past ways of looking at the world. They don't have their own worldview, because they don't have that pedigree. They don't have that inner self level of being. They don't have it. It's not in them. They could never get it. They could study it, and it wouldn't be them, because those who do study and then they project themselves as something are what? Characters. The difference with Charleston White, his work proved who he was. His works in the community proved who he was. Most people don't have community work. They don't work, not to say one is working with the community strictly. They could just be one who naturally does that. No, these people want to be something they are not. It's not in them to thrive. They just want it because they're selfish. They don't have an inner self that tells them to be real, and from the realness that they are will give those other things, and it will just add on to their realness. They're not real. The real ones were killed. The real ones are in prisons. They're called political prisoners. You don't see Real out here no more. Real was killed. So Charleston White, when he came up, all he said was, listen, America, I'm not your problem. Black folks were the only one with you. When he says black, that has become, I guess they call it flat blackness, where everybody's included. Everybody's black when they get here. You can't come to the U.S., came as an immigrant, and then complain about the treatment. They can just go back where they came from. See, every Caucasians know that. All these political pundits, see, what happened was these political pundits, these political voices, these commentators, these politicians, people were allowed to come to the States and take the place of the so-called black American, because they would say what was wanted to be said. But all of a sudden, they wanted to add their own voice, increase their power by saying we. When they say the word we, I won't say the names. A lot of when one says we with melanin in their skin, so-called black in this country, that denotes American descendants of slavery. Because we, like if we're in Jamaica and we say we're talking about Jamaicans. If we're in Barbados and we say we're talking about Barbadians. See what I'm saying? So a lot of people, they come here and then it's like I said, they adapt to a character. That's why when they act in the movie 12 Years a Slave, he was so-called African. Idris Elba, he was so-called African. So when they play these roles, they're imitating, but that's also a propaganda tool to soften the blow of what the so-called American descendant of slavery might be, what he might say. Because there's a lot he could express. He's the only one in this country who could have a legitimate form of expression and make a forward move. I'll just say it like that. A forward move. He's the only one who could, because everyone else, they came from somewhere else anyway. They can go back where they're from. This is a privilege to be able to come to the U.S. as an immigrant. And that goes for Caucasians and so-called black folk. It's a privilege for Asians and all over the world. That's a privilege. They come here as a privilege. It's not a right to be able to come to the USA. So that's why they were chosen, because they can't say that much. And then they went rogue and started talking reckless. But all they want to do is be a part of the machine. They'll play a role for a little more economics. If nothing that they're saying is for the betterment of American descendants of slavery, they're not going to do it, because that can lead to something bad happening. So because there's a role they're playing. But the point is this. When Charleston White said, listen, black folk can go to the United Nations and speak. There's a seat waiting for them, and the world wants to hear what they have to say. He said that when he was under extreme pressure from Caucasians about what he had said on Charlie Kirk. Once he criticized, which he was in character doing it, criticizing Charlie Kirk, everything changed. Different phone calls started coming in. Different warnings are levied. But when he showed his intelligence and brilliance above the common individual that we see in the U.S., especially in media, mainstream media or digital, they're up in there repeating something from 40 and 50 years ago. They're disciples of Dr. Martin Luther King or disciples of El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, like nothing is original. They're Black Power movement descendants or whatever the case may be. They haven't evolved information as a so-called. They haven't. The people who sell it, because those who really know, they ain't talking about it. They're being it. But those who want to project themselves in some leadership position, they just can't figure out what to do, or they don't, they don't have enough talent to do something different. They even may have the position, but they can't take water and make wine. They can't feed the multitudes. They don't have the ability. They don't have that. That's why anyone who comes with that ability, they must be stopped among so-called black. Because you had different groups and hate groups that controlled Negro neighborhoods, the Ku Klux Klan, and that's not even what people thought it was. It goes much deeper than the common conception of what the Ku Klux Klan is. People don't really know. Yes, it was a brutal organization, but people don't know the real history. They don't read enough. They haven't studied. They don't know. But the point is this. When you look at the people now who are in charge, they're the so-called black elite gatekeepers. Now people have figured that out. The masses now know who the gatekeepers are. They've seen videos. They've heard lectures. And now they'll call you a boule. They'll call you a boule without knowing the full context of what it is and what it means. They do know it's an organization that was similar and a parallel to other organizations that Caucasians had in the USA. And they'll call a Negro that. Oh man, y'all boule. And they don't really know, but they are saying more than they should be saying if individuals who are part of these organizations could keep it quiet. So that's why they have to let certain Negroes enter into the fold of the elite and divert away from the original established organizations that existed. So they got these dudes who jump up like I'm the next in line, and they got checked. They're like, who are you to put yourself in the circle amongst the greats like Elijah Muhammad and Marcus Garvey? Like there's a certain circle of so-called consciousness, and there are people who came in, inserted themselves in that circle as though they were on the line of that level. But all they're doing is they're online. They don't even if they were in a community, they don't have a following of that magnitude and then whatever you have now, what they did back then was without the internet. Without mainstream media, you had to pay for a commercial on the radio. They didn't have it. At least with Christians, they went from church to church, and there was a church network, which is what the civil rights movement was based on. But that was still a smaller movement than people really know. They think it was big. It was just projected as big in the media. But that's a whole nother story. People don't even know that, as I said, these elite are now the ones who hold us back. When I say us, anybody, there's elite on every level in every group. And then they speak as though they're criticizing the rich while they're becoming rich. The greatest example of that we saw was recently when we saw this in October, and I think it was September and October, the Riyadh Comedy Festival in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. When we saw that, and we saw these wealthy comedians, we saw Dave Chappelle, Chris Tucker, Bill Burr, we saw big names, and they went, and we saw some of the statements they made saying, oh, it's freer to speak here than it is in America. And they saying weird stuff like that. And it's like, so the amounts of economics that were announced, it ain't about the economics. To poor people, it's always about economics. It's also about power. All these people who spoke well of Saudi Arabia, when they go back, they have first priority in real estate, business holdings. They can go do anything there. That's why it wasn't the cash. There's other agreements. And because even when they left, we don't know how long their contracts are valid for. They will never say anything negative about there because that would almost void what they got paid for. They will never say anything bad about Saudi Arabia. They will never do it. And as long as they don't, they will have carte blanche every time they go there. They will have A1 treatment. They will walk through like royalty because they are tools of propaganda to make the country look better. And that's not because it's Saudi Arabia. That's any country that utilizes celebrities. Celebrities are celebrated. You go read C. Wright Mills, the professor. He once worked at Columbia University. He wrote the book, The Power Elite Theory. Now, the book, in my view, is difficult to comprehend, but he does have some, not difficult, but he created the theory long before anyone even acknowledged that could be true. I think he wrote that book in the 50s. And then eventually, like years later, everybody's saying, oh, he was more right than we thought he was. And now there's millions of books talking about the elite status and the relationship between government, corporations, and the military, and power structures and power dynamics. That's why we say that these so-called entertainers, they're an extension of that. But most people don't read and they don't know. But now they're figuring it out. Oh, man, those dudes are boule. They just figure out like a standard word to call everybody boule. But that don't mean everybody is that. But what they're saying is they're the Negro elite. And they're the watchdogs and social police. And they're left in charge of the other Negroes to increase their positioning while being like so-called leaders. They're not leads. You can see it, but there's nothing to really keep criticizing them about. You see who they are, you move on. See, once every level of information that one learns makes them get angry. Don't get angry. Don't get mad. Just be busy. Get busy about what you're doing, because they're doing their job. Everybody else should be doing their job. Just don't go for what they're saying if you don't like it. If you're not entertained by this minister when he speaks, don't listen. You can speak yourself. Get your own show. But there's no reason to put them down. Everyone is taught with a mentality just because they don't like something to degrade somebody else. That just may not be what's for you. Some people, they need a leader. They need someone to follow. They need a hero. They need that. They need structure because they don't have that self-determination of to lead themselves. Everybody ain't got that. So we do have these pseudo saviors now. The pseudo savior from inner cities. The inner city pseudo saviors who are put in positions to lead others. You can't have Caucasians come in no more. Sell in so-called black folk a bunch of liquor and tobacco products and tobacco what do you call those things, the wrapping paper for marijuana. You can't have people from other communities coming in and selling it the way it's better that some so-called black folks sell it. It's better that all these celebrities are now pushing legal gambling. The three companies that we know, FanDuel, Fanatics, and DraftKings. Is better. They sponsor a lot of these podcasts. It's better for the Negro to sign with them, get a big check, and one can win at gambling, but gambling is not a sustainable way to earn funds. It's just not. So these people, they sell liquor. Why are you playing sports for all these years and you selling something to drink? Wouldn't it be, at least when Curtis 50 Cent Jackson rose to fame, at least he sold what? Vitamin water. At least he had a beverage. It wasn't the greatest drink. It had some, some sugar qualities to it that weren't, absolutely ideal. But the thing was, vitamin water was also a sister product of smart water. Smart water was first. It was like a osmosis processed water. So, it wasn't like it wasn't liquor. So that's what made it great. 50 was in shape. He was lifting weights while he was rhyming. So at least the imagery was ideal. A lot of people said around that time, I got to get in the gym. I got to start working out. From just the example of 50. So from 50 Cent's example to where we are now is a completely negative outlook. You got people selling products that's named after venereal diseases. Venereal diseases. People have products, lip gloss named after a venereal disease. And not one top leader, the so-called black elite leader, stepped forward and said, that's going to stop being sold tomorrow. I promise you better stop that. That's what the NAACP used to do. It ain't always right because we do have freedom of expression. People can choose to buy what they want to buy. You can't tell somebody what not to sell or buy in a free market economy. It's legal. So how? But the imagery that it was selling, certain so-called folk who used to would say something, didn't say a word. That's when you knew they were fully immersed into that so-called black elite pseudo savior leadership position. They were pseudo savior leaders now. It's like they need to just stop. But they didn't stop because the next line of pseudo leaders never stepped forward in that way. They didn't want to be in the old tradition of the orator, the great speaker, the preacher. They don't even go to church like that. They don't go to the other religious denominational meetings like that. So they want to be more of a podcaster and get online and talk about economic prosperity and something like they don't know what to do. So they're around and they're fiddling around, and it's chump change they're fiddling for. They're offering chump change. Oh, yeah, you can get with this and come do this and something real small. But Charleston White hit them so hard in the head with something global, they're still figuring out what he said. They'll have to retrain the Negroes that follow the elite's path and reacclimate them to being able to come back to the masses to mislead them. The masses ain't gonna do nothing against you. See, to have a continuous mindset of fear is sad, really. People are afraid, and Charleston White mentioned this. We say Charleston White because what we're saying is when he got to a high position in digital media, and this is Online Time Fame, the Online Time Fame podcast. When he got to a high position as far as digital media, he started meeting bigger people. He didn't have to say nothing no more. He was coasting. But the reason why the streets embraced him was because he went against the grain, and it's shocking and it's funny, and they call it shock radio, and they used to call it that when it was Howard Stern back in the 80s when he started his career in the 70s actually. But when we knew about him, probably was like the 90s and the 2000s, and because he had a movie out. And when people saw his whole life story and they knew about his books, people kind of knew, oh man, this dude is, like he was the one. There's others, but he was the one of the latest, the latest example of people who were doing shock jock radio and just exciting and saying outlandish things. Because, then hip hop started doing it. There's certain rap groups that make outlandish statements, and it's entertainment. It's called horrorcore, and there were shocking genres of so-called rap. But that's why rappers were really characters, because those who really knew, those who really were in the street, and there are some. Now, this is the funny thing. There are some rappers that are super street people, but guess what? They can't rap. They're street. They were doing with all this wild stuff, but one thing they weren't doing was rhyming well. The usually street dude ain't that good of an MC. There's a couple that do both, but where is that really leading to brag that one was doing all this low scale stuff, and it used to be about doing high scale stuff. They weren't high scale. So the point is, when you look at the so-called status quo elite, the pseudo saviors, they're there, but they're getting older. And as I said, as the young people come and follow behind them, and they're going to take those positions, they're unstable. They don't have a positioning. So that's why when the comedians marked, who did the Riyadh Comedy Festival, they marked the end of their careers. That was 2025, September and October. They ended their careers because they're going to still make economics, and but it won't come to pass like people say it will. It don't matter because they're wealthy enough now. Some needed a lot of cash, and they ain't saying that much. The ones at the bottom, the fill-ins, and the ones who they call when other good people cancel, but they're going to just, who wouldn't take the cash? They ain't going to say that much. Yup, I needed the cash, I took it. That's what they're going to say. I just made up an act. I just showed up. The superstars, the Kevin Harts and the Dave Chappelles and the, the comedians on that magnitude, Bill Burr probably being the most popular, being that he's a Caucasian. He's like he'd be Dave Chappelle if he was a brother. And Bill Burr is vicious and ruthless, and he's criticized people for doing private parties and jobs, taking the cash. So they had to get him to do the same thing. Someone had to say, offer him as much as until he says yes. And that's what can be done in the Middle East. Some people will say, I'm going to make you, sell. And that's his situation. But the fact is, he won't be able to say what he used to say. So that's the changing of the guard. But Charleston White already said quietly some things none of them will say. Because he talked about real life situations like they do as well, but he said it in a non-comedy context when he was put under pressure. He said, wait a minute, there's a seat right now at the United Nations for so-called American descendants of slavery can speak and say what they want. The world is listening. They ain't said nothing. They never have in 60 years. They haven't said nothing globally. 60 years. So they can come talk all they want right now. If they come talk as a puppet to the United Nations, to the world community, they're still going to get laughed at because everybody's going to say, I see his hand up your back and moving your mouth to say what you're saying. You can't fake that because the truth is the truth around the world. But the so-called American black is sometimes angrier than they're supposed to be. Sometimes somebody just played you. You played yourself. They don't know the full extent of history in this country. People don't know the real history or they wouldn't be upset. If they knew the real makeup of the country, they wouldn't be mad. But even our so-called conservative politicians have this way they present the USA as that's just for no reason. We're just victims who were done wrong. That's what they're selling. This is a minister. The minister never said, all right, turn the other cheek, treat your brother as though you would have him treat you. No, they're going back and forth politically, criticizing presidents and stuff. You can't do that nowhere in the world except the USA. You can't criticize now the president nowhere else. But when they say something, they're not saying something that opens the door for others to thrive. They're just saying something where we just keep listening to him say it. And I've heard these individuals that are so-called black elite leaders have said, the world is different. We have the internet now. You all can speak. They said that. That's what lets them off the hook. If you choose to listen to this radio station to him, you can listen to him. But he already said everything switched. It's on you now. That's why we said long range comedy says something to you. It said it's on you. It ain't nobody else. Why are you getting upset? The reason to not be upset in the world today is we have to look at ourselves first. Let me get in shape. Let me eat better, the best I can. Let me do some exercises at a basic level. Am I obese? How do people say they're poor, but they're overweight? Let me get in shape. Let me be prepared for the harsh conditions that the world may bring to me. Let me be as ready as I can. And that's very difficult to do. It can be. There's ways to learn. But that's not an easy task. We're not saying that. What we're saying is people's priorities have to be in the proper perspective. We do know that the people doing all this talking as so-called leaders, political commentators, so-called podcasters, is trivial. What most people are saying when it's about survival and one having the ability to take care of themselves. That's what's important. And how is someone who's so-called on another economic level addressing someone who they don't even know our conditions on the street? If we're the one on the street, they don't know the conditions. They ain't been there in a while, and they definitely don't want to come back. So if it means them staying on top of you to stay where they are, that's natural for them to do. We're not even criticizing that. We're not even critical. But the point is, we have to look at ourselves and improve ourselves and move ourselves. Meaning individually. There is no unity like that where people work as a group. That's done. Now, if someone happens to be doing something positive that you're doing, but as far as mobilizing groups, that ain't working. That didn't work since 60 years. You don't even just get right. But the point is, people are still selling pseudo savior behavior. That's what they're selling. From this black empowerment, it was that. Then it was black economic empowerment. It's that now. And it's like a combination of motivational, but, like they don't know what to do. Because that ain't nothing on a global scale. That don't even register nationally. It just sounds good. It's nothing. And while them individuals were talking, they're getting economics from who they can get it from. That's all they were doing. I mean, right now. And it don't work. It doesn't give enough. And they don't have that giving spirit. They don't have it. So when Charleston White gave out the knowledge, what he was saying was, you can take this and go do what you got to do with it. If you want to get funding, you go here. If you want to know the origins of what you do with a nonprofit, you go here. He did all that before. So he's giving that up. Them other dudes ain't touching that because he's an outsider when he first started talking. Charleston White was an outsider. He's an outsider now, but now he's going to get in. But he already said what he's going to say for those who heard what he said. He already said what he was going to say. He said it. Even when he got pressed about Charlie Kirk in September of 2025, he said, wait a minute, there's a seat at the United Nations waiting for so-called American descendants of slavery to speak, to make a move. Now, he wasn't talking to so-called black folk because what are black folk going to do but give you their opinion? What I would say is they ain't got no PhDs. They ain't no think tanks and no organizations that deal with academic and political or socioeconomic or political, any financial type of organization or association do they work with that's national even. They ain't even national, but it's just somebody who can give their opinion. And the ones who may be national don't mean they know. And so if Charleston White said, this is what it is, That's where he put the hammer down. Pow, hit the table. Pow. And all Caucasians who are somebody heard what he said. Oh, he figured that out? Now it's in books. Everybody's seen it if they know how to read. They know what that means. If they saw the Malcolm X movie, right? Nah, that part wasn't in the movie. See? You know what I'm saying? But they saw that. They kind of could know it if that's where they were going. But he said it because they were letting him know. We're about to come at you, Charleston. They couldn't. His intelligence was too high. It's too valuable. See, these throwaway dudes who go back and forth on some low level, they're not valuable. People who are valuable are not just easily eliminated, especially when it's just conversing and not advocating for any type of upheaval. It's just conversation. It's nothing. These dudes are selling and putting down Caucasians all the time. Free speech. Get to talk. Yeah, and these, and this and that. And they let it go. But I'm like, that ain't even the way to do it. First is self-improvement. These dudes running around with diabetes. Like, you arguing about what the Caucasians is doing, but you got type 2 diabetes, which is only a matter of controlling diet and some extra exercise, where one wouldn't even need it, but you got all this to say. I mean, I'm no disrespect to anyone who has health ailments, but what I'm saying is these aren't fit individuals that's even talking. They're not in high levels of physical fitness. So that's, they just not. It's a lot of stuff they're not. But they're talking good. If you can talk good, a good orator can make economics in the so-called black community because of the tradition of preachers. They selling nothing but saying everything. They're giving nothing but selling it all. They're talking. What I'm saying is what they're selling is what they're talking. It's the words themselves. No actions behind it. No leadership from their own actions. And in the background, they're selling anger. And we don't hate Caucasians. That's stupid. That's stupid. We're looking at what happens in the past, and we know history. Yes, very unfortunate, and it has long-lasting ramifications. Yes, but these people are not at the economic. They're not at the intellectual level. They're not at the economic level to say, this is what I'm going to do about that myself. They don't have it. They got the economics. They got the funding necessary to move around. They're not men among men. They're not. They're looked at as boys amongst the country. They're not a voice where they say, whoa, wait a minute. What did he say? That makes sense. That ain't how they talk to world leaders in this country. They talking up and down at him, which is great. Oh, yeah, you used to know him before he got elected. So you get to say a bunch of weird stuff and y'all go back and forth. That ain't how world leaders talk to they're just talking down to him like he's a joke. The so-called leader that you see, the so-called black leader, they ain't taking him seriously because he ain't being taken seriously around the world. At least Malcolm was on them planes flying around the world, meeting with world leaders. These dudes talk from here. And they might go to a third world country like in the Caribbean and talk while they write that off on their taxes as a vacation. That's all they doing. Do something real small scale, like a demonstration of what they imagine Martin Luther King would be doing. Like, oh, I'm going to take this out the Martin Luther King book and I'm going to say this and say that. And no disrespect to them. That's why we don't like to say it. But what I'm saying is for Charleston White to say what he said, it ain't Charleston White as a name. It was an individual who functioned as an entity addressing today's current realities that hadn't been addressed in 60 years. He moved on that as a little dude. He's small in stature physically, a giant of a man for what he said. All these other dudes swear they real and they just figuring out how can I get a way to make some funds. I can't rap that good, so maybe I can try this. It's just hustling. So we respect the hustle, but not when it's taking advantage of people selling it as something else. Don't sell it as something else. And that's not a judgment call. That's just a mark. That's a lame dude. That's a nobody in the streets. A nobody. They just talking, man. Nobody want to be on digital platforms and as a so-called digital celebrity that's not what people want. But when Charleston White came, he had stuff to take care of. He had family. He had economics. He was taking care of other people's families. He'll disappear one day and be behind the scenes making moves. He's in the middle now. He'll disappear and won't have to have no so-called fame. But a lot of these dudes could never raise to the economics. Charleston White is now getting economic opportunities based on talent, based on his ingenuity. And even with talent, he had the heart to speak the truth. He was speaking it in the street. These other dudes ain't spoke it like that. They'll be saying, what did he say? And they'll figure a way they can imitate what he said and then be a pseudo savior. That's the current way. Caucasians ain't stupid. They know these dudes ain't got the heart and the drive and the realness, but they do have enough to stab their own people and stop others from rising beyond the positions that they want. That's what the so-called black community is. It's a group of so-called Negro pseudo-elites who stop any true talent and progress from occurring because they can't adapt. It was called, in academics, it's called the Peter Principle, where one rises to their own level of incompetency, meaning you get a raise, you raise up, you raise up, you raise up. And then when you get to a certain level, you don't have the ability to raise no more because you went high as one could go based upon the merit that they earn. But now they're incompetents. They're incompetent. One has risen to the level of their own incompetence, meaning you rise to a certain point, but then you ain't functional no more. You earn a position, but you can't function at the position because we don't know what you can do at the position until you get it. But your past performance was so well, they raised you to another level. Now they were good enough to maintain that level. And if it's so-called black folk, they like, just leave them here. Leave them there, man. At least we don't have to worry about nobody who really can do it coming close to where we're at. So when Charleston White told Caucasians, I'm not your problem, China's your problem, Russia's your problem, they buying up all your property, they have a voice in your country. Now that's a whole nother conversation, but just him saying it on the fly like he did, what he was saying is, what's happened to all these productive so-called black folk? The Negroes they put in positions shrug their shoulders and say, ain't none good enough to do nothing that we can really use, boss. That's what their actions are showing. But they didn't want to be exposed because they may have been ruled to be obsolete. Oh, we got a new one now. We don't need the old one no more. The whole world knows that's where the black race is right now in the USA. They know that. The whole world is like, they're stupid. They're dumb. They're saying it, whatever language they're using, they're stupid. They're dumb. Because we're listening to somebody they ain't Malcolm X. They ain't at the level of functioning, the functionality. People criticize Dr. Martin Luther King, and we won't go into but he was different than what they think he was. Yeah, errors were made on every level in history. People made wrong turns. These dudes was in their 40s. But what do we see 40-year-olds doing right now online? Talking about gangbanging, being in drugs and being in prison. At least they wasn't doing that. We're talking about Martin Luther King as we learned certain facts about him and certain ties he had. And people talking about him like he's a dog and they want to make disrespectful movies. He was a prodigy. They say, oh, he cheated for his PhD. That was something that came out after he passed on, an author wrote. But people knew who he was before he rose to the level he was at. But because of the message of peace, and that's a whole nother thing. Like I said, one just has to read as much as possible on that era. Because many writers and journalists have covered that era. So I don't want to go into that. But because my point was he was at least presentable and peaceful. So who can knock that? A peaceful dude got shot. That's what we're saying. A peaceful dude. So everybody was mad after that. And they probably been mad ever since. But he was in a higher level of politics than people understand. He was different. He was doing things that was just political as a minister. I'll say this to finish that out, to make the point. Dr. Martin Luther King was the man in Atlanta. You talk about Atlanta, he was the man. All he had to do was fall back and he would have been running stuff. Had the great positioning. He would have been someone who was prosperous, just like these people trying to capitalize off of now. There's people from a generation after that who got into the Martin Luther King mode where they say a lot, ain't doing nothing, and they get paid for it. And everybody's saying, yeah, and they respect them. They ain't doing nothing, though. They don't have no true talent. They can't utilize groups of people and generate economics. They can't do it. They just talk a bunch of stuff and they try to get theirs. Get yours, but they're limited in intellect. That's just the period. I'm not going to explain it, because the more you explain it, they're listening and they're saying, oh, I got to go work on that. We're not sending them to school like that all the time. That's what they do. The so-called higher level, so-called blacks that's famous, when they get to a certain level, you don't see them making scores of successful people from the knowledge they have. They don't do. You ain't seeing it. I'll give you an example. I used it already. Let's go take the world of music. You don't see none of these dudes putting out 30, 40, 50 groups of superstars under their umbrella. They got record labels. They're top level management people. They got the economics. They don't do it. And you can go to any field and you'll see the same thing of what they're not producing. Now, some can, and that's not their position. Nope, don't do that. Keep them where they're at. And so they're just there in the way. No reason to criticize, because like we said, it's 3 levels of existence. And this is an old saying that we say it all the time. Small minds talk about people. Average minds talk about events. Great minds talk about ideas. And what we added was ideas and their solutions, or the implementation of solutions. Apply knowledge. That's more important. So these dudes ain't got that level. So what we do, our people say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start something for people where they can benefit. They don't got to pay nothing. Take the information and they can improve their lives. Show them how to start a business. They ain't got to come to us. They ain't got to buy nothing. Ain't no course. Ain't no nothing. Now, that's basic if they want to get that. So they can go to empowermenttothepeople.com, read that, and then they'll know how to start a business. If they don't know. Just basic. But the point is sparking their mind to say, what does that business entail? First, get in shape. Maybe you can start out with an in-shape business. If you're obese, say someone's obese, overweight, that's the greatest place to start, because you got a before and an after. If they lose 30 pounds and say, I lost 30 pounds, that's impressive. You lost 30 pounds. How'd you do that? Now they can do some public speaking. I can do lectures. I go to community centers. I go in neighborhoods and I tell people how to get in shape and how I did it from right where they are with no economics. I took nothing. And I just decided in my mind, I'm going to lose weight. That's inspirational. That's inspirational. Everyone can do that. Everyone who's obese can do it. You might think I'm overweight, I'm obese, I'm in a bad position. No, you're in a good position. If you have a general level of health, you go to your doctor, check, hey, can I start exercising, doc? He says yes, work out. When you get in a good amount of shape, you can show others, here's my before, here's my after. That's a great inspirational message for all inner city people to show in communities, anywhere, suburbs, inner city, in the mountain regions, down south, everywhere, the world. Why did we get that? My people saw Tupac's record, Keep Your Head Up, dedicated to the so-called black woman. He's like, oh, Tupac cares if don't nobody else care. See, so I'm like, whoa, all right. But what are the main talking points being sold in so-called society today? The red pill and blue pill, I think it's called, and not really being unified with women. So obviously, there's some good points that involve that argument. That's not a question. So fitness is big because, as I said, just starting from a base level, a ground level, when Pac said about, having love for sisters in the 1993 song Keep Your Head Up, it made sense because we say that's a call to action. Will the real man get up? I know you fed up, ladies, keep your head up, but you got to keep your head up. That was like, oh, that's real, because what we see in the media, what we see online, that it's male against female. And for the step back and say, hold on, no one's perfect. Pac wasn't perfect. We ain't perfect. Our people ain't. No one's perfect. But can we just say, forget somebody? Nah. Sisters, get in shape. Young men, get in shape. Children should be following their parents. Get in shape first. Get ready. There's a saying. I like this saying that an elder said one time. He said, wake up, get up, stand up, and line up. I like that. I was like, oh, all right. Wake up, get up, stand up, and line up. I'm like, oh, I don't know where he got that from. He just said it. I'm like, all right, I'm with you on that. So we have to make our moves, get in shape. It don't cost, don't have to. Now, there are levels to exercise and performance. after a certain amount of push-ups, and if you know the famous Hall of Fame football player Herschel Walker, in the 1980s, if I'm correct, he was from the 80s. He was known to have built a impressive physique through hundreds of push-ups and calisthenics per day in high school before he went to college. He hadn't lifted weights until near the end of his football career. He was just, strong naturally. Of course, there was some, strength genetics involved. I'm sure he had speed, but his workout regimen was hundreds. And I'm not saying everyone can do hundreds. What I'm saying is some people think, I can't do nothing. I ain't got no equipment. I ain't got nowhere to work out. I got to watch my family. I got 2 jobs. 10 times a day, do 10 push-ups throughout a 24-hour period when you're up. If you're up, let's say 18 hours, you're up. Find 10 times a day where you can sneak in 10 push-ups. And if it's women, the push-ups are going to be less. They can do the female push-up, the one where they are supported by their by their legs, by their lower legs, their knees. They can do that push-up. But I'm just saying it as an idea of starting somewhere to start where improvement will be seen. But I'll just say this is a funny thing. The thing about exercise that makes it so much of a challenge is because people think, if I exercise, I'm going to always just be in the gym all the time. Because when you go to the gym, you see those people, they're in there all the time, every day, they're muscular and fit, but that's all they do. And people say, I don't have the time to only do that, and I don't want to do that. But there's a secret to it. If one works out as much as possible to see change for all extra time one has, no, don't just be at the nightclub. Don't be whatever other pastime one would do. Don't do those things. Take that extra time that one would have, use that time for exercise, but use it for a certain amount of time. Let's say once you get in shape, that's the point is, when you get in shape, you ain't got to be in the gym every day. The people who you see in the gym all the time, that has become their social activity. They like being there. That's where they socialize at. They speak to the people. Hey man, what's up? That's where their friend, they met and made friends at the gym. See, so that's why you'll see people, they could be there twice a week and they're still going to be in shape at the level they're at, pretty much. Now if they're trying to still strive for certain levels of improvement, of course, they might not be there as much as they were, or they don't have to be there as much as they were. But, if they're trying to still be high level, they still got to be in there like that. But if one is just saying, all right, I'm good where I'm at, they don't have to be there. That's the point. So don't think that you see someone in the gym and they look like they're always working out. Yeah, to a degree, if you want to see changes quickly, you work out as much as you can, physically allowable, while still being able to recuperate and get the, proper recuperation and nutrition. So don't go, like I said, talk to some, do some research, talk to a physician first. But once one gets to a certain point, they can go once a week. It's nothing. It's good. They can do that because they already mastered a level that they're comfortable with, of where they are in their size and physique. They don't got to go. So that's a fallacy that once one starts working out, that's the only thing they're going to do and that's going to dominate their lifestyle. No, that's just the people who go every day. And that's what they want to do. That's not a bad habit. That's not a bad pastime to follow. That's not a bad thing to do, working out. And they have a regimen. So they go to work and work out. Don't think you can't have a full life. But they've said, I'm not going to walk around out of shape. My discipline level is here. And I'm there. My fitness level is this. So that's what people. That's the lowest scale we can begin at, where that's all we got is ourself. All one has is their physical health. If their physical body, if they got it. If one has average health, the use of all their bodily limbs and everything is working, you got something valuable right there. You got your brain. If you got your mind state, that exercise is gonna help all that. For free. So that's why we said empowermentforthepeople.org, empowermentforthepeople.com. Go get that. Yeah. It's a book to go with it, but the book ain't necessary. Just like I said, look it up. The free information will lead one to what they need to look at on their own. They can go online and look, But we just made sure, and our people knew they got to put out a book so they can show that they were focused. It wasn't just an idea, as we said, ideas and the implementation of the idea. So that's why it's Unlock the Physical Fitness Expert Within You. Ishmael Ill, that's the book. He let it be known. That's like a 289 page ebook. So it's $3. So that's the cheapest you can sell a book for on Amazon. It's for ebook level. It's $3. Sometimes they make a sale and make it for free. So it wasn't about that, but they put it down to let it be seen. One ain't just talking. They did what they could do with a small amount, which can help millions. So as I said, Pac was the catalyst. Tupac Amaru Shakur and Tupac Shakur Foundation. That was the catalyst of it. So we so that's who they sparked the idea. But then it was to say, all right, take that song. That song was like, and put it like this. The way we translate it, we said that song was like the song We Are the World, where that song was like a lot of songs that are public advocacy songs where it helps people. So Pac's song was like a song helping so-called American black woman. It was dedicated to her, and it helped them. So that was one way. So we like, our people put it down. We did that, and now we did something that these people with millions don't do. We ain't telling you to go gamble. We ain't selling no liquor. We ain't telling you to go roll up no blunts and all of that stuff, or no, what they call blunts and smoking. Nah, do something for health. Do something else. That's what our message was. So when they did that, the point is, we don't see the elite. They don't have the mind to develop. That's without no resources. That was done. Very little. They put that on. See, 285 page ebook. They put that. So the point is, as we look at these past so-called leaders, we ain't mad at them. We ain't mad at the Caucasian, because they said, we did hear Reverend Al Sharpton. He said they have the internet now. Years ago, he said they have the internet now. Everybody can have a voice. So it ain't just what I say. You can have a show and say what you say. So that absolves him of being someone who's misleading people. He's talking, that's his viewpoint, and he's just the archive of what he learned through his experiences. But so he can't save nobody like that. He has his vision of what he does. So if somebody want to keep listening to what he's saying, they can free to do that. But other people, they ain't figured out what they can do, because those elites still have power and they still got positioning because they were given those positions. See, now they rose up grassroots, but they're recognized by more than grassroots sectors in U.S. society. And they ain't said nothing. So it's just like but it's a hate politics. He don't hate, but it's a hate politics of, the implication is that the system did something. But them people, that's why when Charleston White said, hold on, wait a minute. Ain't nobody never went to the United Nations and said, this is what it is. Now, in the future, they will go, because now that the word out, the Charleston White put the word out that they could go, they'll go and make a pseudo little presentation, and it'll be like the same thing they do anyway. Another pseudo tap dancing presentation, but they're presenting themselves as stupid. Because they're going to say it like, oh, hey, glad to be here and blah, blah, blah. And if you could work toward this, it'll still be something weak. And a little kid will see it and say, oh, man, he's Illuminati. That's what they call them. They call people Illuminati or Boule. They figured that part out. There's been decades of knowledge that's been around. And then they finally figured out these dudes ain't here to help us. They just the Negro elite. And I'm like, I ain't mad at them. They hustle. They survive. It's a occupation. It's a job. And who's listening to them? We listen to our parents. We listen to our productive school teachers to the work that the teachers do. They lead in the community. The elementary, I'm talking elementary, junior high, and high school. It's not just indoctrination. There's information that can be processed. One can process information with their brain, and even if it was some indoctrination or some type of agenda being set, this was real education being taught in this country. So whatever's going on now, people just sitting back and they listening and this and news and that's not. We're in a different era. This is the digital era. They have traditional outlets, of course, but there's also digital information that's unlimited in scope. You see old tapes uploaded on various websites. You see old interviews from the 50s, 60s, 70s, information no one never knew is right there. But see, the implementation of information is the problem. People don't know what to do with it. Should I be mad? The funniest thing that we see is when somebody learns something and it blows their mind and they go crazy. Man, God, This is a good example of when you see a child, they go to college. And when they come back after that first year, that first semester, man, they come back and they're on the other side. They done read some books and got around some other people who say, speak and perform and act a certain way. And now here they come. They done jumped in the fray and they telling the parent how you're wrong and you're this. I mean, it's hilarious because the parents laugh. And sometimes people will come out of that, they'll say, all right, you know what? I was tripping, and they'll come back down to reality. Some of them go over the top and they never come back. So that's what we see when we see a lot of people. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying the world ain't what it is, but you got these same people who's been saying the same thing in this, the Caucasian did this. Like, all right, but who are you? What are you? What's your move? They don't have no move. It's just, it becomes a talking head who just says a certain philosophy. So that's why we mentioned the fitness and getting in shape. Man, get in shape, get on point. We ain't going to be a political voice. That's not what we on. That's not nothing. We can promote here a little bit. But as far as just trying to do and give some knowledge and information to somebody, get in shape. That's a powerful message for us all. The most fit dude can still work out. There's always improvement that can be made in one's health. The benefits of our health are infinite. So, that's just something that one goes to the doctor, gets a checkup, get in shape. Most people talking ain't in top shape. They ain't. And even they look, so that's a whole thing, but that's just self-improvement. These dudes trying to sell something. How you selling something of that magnitude to somebody who ain't got it? And that's because they got their own self-interest and greed. It ain't $1. It ain't $3. They want to make moves, and I'm selling. And I ain't knocking hustles. I'm just saying, if you can come with something that is that way, that's a benefit. Get in shape. I'd rather sell that. Get in shape. That's an idea that's going to bring dividends in people's health, just indirectly. People go, man, thank you. When you said that, we've heard others say it, and we're like, that's true. Just the fact that they said it, man, that's right. I was thinking that. But what are we doing? Most people are encouraged because the views and the attention comes from the drama, the arguing. We'll never got to say nothing about nobody. That's not nothing. Why? Not negatively. No, it's enough to be focused on positively. Exercise, fitness, eating the best we can in this country where it's the best. But everybody's talking about it's the worst. So that's why when we talked about the Riyadh Festival of Comedy, it was hilarious because they got people to compromise. Like I said, they ain't gave them no short paper. They ain't did that for short paper. They got reach, access, and prestige. They can now have the phone numbers of people they can call. Well, now they dealing with the elites of this country. They already have a certain access to elites here. They had it. They can call different high-level people, these comedians, and they're all in that celebrity, their entity. They're in that celebrity status quo of positioning that most people are not in. That's the aim in this country, not kings and queens, but celebrity access. Access to the wealthy and get something out of it while they can. So that's what the country was built on. But it's in times of chaos and economic upheaval, they don't have nothing to add on to make it bigger. They can't make it that. They just want to cut into what's already there. They can't multiply what we already see. They ain't got it. They don't have the ability. They don't have the intellect. Like I said, so that's why I say when we say this is online time fame, this the fame that comes from online, not ours, because we don't have it. We don't want that. We don't want to be in the public eye at all. Some people want that. It's something that comes with it. But the point is, there's a lot of people that are online doing it, but they weren't able to do it on a traditional level. The traditional mainstream media level, which was radio and television. Those were the main up until like the 1980s, coming into the 90s, when it was the three big stations, NBC, ABC, and CBS. It was the main radio stations in each market. There was a big station, and this is what these people were tied through. If it was audio, it was music. If it was visuals, it was TV programs, it was movies, and it was the news, and they had access there. So that's what they come from. So now we see people who came from that mainstream media, and then they just transitioned over. They crossed into digital media. You got other stars who are only digital. They're online times famous. That's where they are. They're streamers. They come from that. They wasn't famous from the television era. They came straight from the internet, and that's where they got on at, and they're global. That's the difference. So a lot of people are striving to make a transition, trying to establish a place they can be. But as far as contributing to the everyday people, they ain't around the everyday people. When you're around people every day and you see the conditions and how they could improve, that makes you say, well, man, I gotta move I can make. And on the backside, on the reverse return of that, I might benefit from it in a positive way. That's what you can say in the street level. But these other dudes, it's none different than being in the inner city. People want to have a liquor store. They want to have a liquor store, or they might have a corner grocery store, or they might have some product, in the urban, so-called urban area. They might have a clothing store. So these dudes, the fastest way to cash is the liquor store dude, because people are alcoholics are addicted to drinking. You want to have some smoke products because people are smoking. And usually they either not physically addicted, they may be psychologically addicted to smoking. So that's why when you see these so-called celebrities and the first thing they doing is selling some liquor, that's all you can think of, bro. Liquor? You got access to hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in assets through your partnerships and associations of people you're tied to. And you're going to reduce yourself to selling liquor to your own community, bro? You selling gambling? That's the local spot where people used to be out in the back shooting dice in the alley. That's what gambling is. You the alley dude. You the man. I mean, I'm not putting it down. I'm just laughing at it. It's comedy comes in many ways. That's all you got is selling gambling. They paid you to sell gambling to your own group. It's hilarious. Because that's why I said it shows that even though somebody is good at one thing, that Peter principle is what, I forget the author of that, who the book and the theory is, people rise to their own level of incompetence. Like once they got that final raise, that final positioning, they're incompetent, but they did so well below those levels, they earn that top level, but they don't function. So that's why everybody's calling people also gatekeepers. Because they're not a gatekeeper to open up opportunity for others and siphon people up the ladder. They don't know what to do. Some don't want to do it. Oh, no, I won't look good if I help somebody. That's where we're at. And that's who was exposed by Charleston White when he said what he said. So when we say Charleston White, it's holding up the character and the persona that he identified. It's not him as an individual. He pointed out something that wasn't being said. Because that's what he was doing, being brash, being raw, but there was truth and there was jewels and there was gems in what he was saying. So that's why it became Charleston White. Everybody knew. So he came from digitally. He came and broke through what everybody else was talking about and made his own way. Pow, broke through the stratosphere with it. And people are like, oh, what's up? They might say something funny, but they ain't got the knowledge. They might have the knowledge, but they ain't funny. So he made it at least where the knowledge could break through. And he said we could promote saying who said it. So if it's Charleston White, it was Charleston White. Not because it's cursing. Ain't one curse been said in none of these broadcasts. Not none. Ain't necessary. That's why we did a show called Use of the N-word in Public is Ignorant. People don't agree with that. They use it. That ain't going to help you in business, though. N-word. Now, it's liked because it's looked at in a negative way, but it's an impactful word that it better be in an entertaining manner. And what I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying when people use it, that's an outlaw term. It's an outlaw. That's not something that commercial entities can embrace. But it's good to keep people in a certain mindset if that's what they allow it to do. Charleston White say that N-word, it get attention. Then he dropping knowledge. And then I do say people use it in a public in a forum. We talked about it on a different episode. But anyway, as we say, this is the Online Time Fame Podcast. I'm your host, JD. Go to onlinetimefame.com And the broadcasts are on there too. There's a RSS feed. You can listen directly off the website. We want to get a email list. We want to get a list of the people who listen, so we can communicate with the people off any platform. And we got your information and any updates. We communicate with our own people that way. And we would like to do that. So we want to put up some type of, we're going to eventually put up a email list on the website where we can, communicate from there. But anyway, thank you for listening. This has been the Online Time Fame Podcast, and we'll say peace.